I wanted to start by just telling you a couple of things. This is not going to be a long bio because I have a kind of a slightly different way I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Our speaker is Dr. Alexandra Horowitz, who I think many people don't realize she grew up in Colorado until we lost her to the East Coast, but she kind of hinted that we might be able to lure her back. So I hope that might be the case, or at least visit often. Dr. Horowitz is a cognitive scientist, and she predominantly has studied dogs, but I know she is interested in the emotional and cognitive lives of other animals. She has several incredible books on dogs, one being Our Dogs and Ourselves, Inside of a Dog, which is one of my absolute favorites. In fact, she and I are going out to the Colorado Prison Dog Program tomorrow to meet the prison program and bringing some of her books. She also wrote on looking 11 Walks with Expert Eyes. But I have to tell you, my absolute favorite writing that I've come across from you, Alexandra, is the piece you had in the New York Times called The Things People Say to Their Dogs. And I thought I would just give you one maybe choice example from that article. You can look it up. Here's one of the quotes that evidently you came across, is somebody who was saying, "Someone has a bagel and it's not you. And it's not going to be you with that kind of behavior." So as you can see, Alexandra is a close study of the lives of people and animals. I think you're going to really enjoy hearing about her work. She's doing very important work studying not only animal cognition and behavior, but really the ethical questions related to how people and animals interact with one another. So, welcome.
Thanks, Philip. I want to dedicate this talk to Finnegan, who's pictured here, who died last year. I wrote a Times piece on him. It's his obituary. The Times doesn't run obituaries of animals, non-human animals, but they ran this one, and I think there should be more of that. It's thrilling to be here. You know, the idea of an Institute for Animal Sentience is not just a good one, it's positively inspired. Everything I've studied and learned about animals since the beginning of my graduate work about 30 years ago feels that it leads toward this work, an empirically based change in our society's thinking about animals. So today I want to talk to you briefly about how we got here, the evolution of a conversation about animals, especially animal minds, what I study, over the last 2 millennia, what we know today, and my feeling about what that means for the future. And in the spirit of historical unpacking, a bit about my history, I study, as Philip said, dog cognition, domestic dogs, Canis familiaris, who live with their families and allow me to observe them at play or come with their people to my lab to participate in behavioral games. I research especially dogs' perceptual abilities, and my interest is in trying to translate that into what it is like to be a dog. I came to dogs accidentally. I grew up with dogs in Colorado, but 25 years ago, with the exception of Mark Beckhoff's work, the cognition of dogs was not a subject of scholarly scientific work, mostly because we thought we knew dogs. They were familiar. We better know them, right? They're in our beds. Also because we had a bias against them. They weren't big enough of brain or closely enough related to us to be worth scientific interest. That has changed. So let's start with the past, differentiation and dehumanization. We've been talking about who animals are, what they know or feel or understand for thousands of years. In particular, the focus has been on what distinguishes or differentiates animals' experience and knowledge from human experiences, and it's been used to dehumanize them. It goes back to Plato. Aiming to identify what makes humans different from non-humans, he came up with a definition. Man, he said, is a featherless biped. To this, Diogenes, another Greek philosopher, reportedly plucked a poor chicken and presenting it said, "Here is Plato's man." So Plato was quick to respond. He said, okay, man is a featherless biped and has broad nails, not claws. What he did was add another element to the list to reassure ourselves that humans retain our place at the apex of the animal kingdom. And we have been, as a society, as societies, adding to that list ever since. And the list mostly has to do with trying to pinpoint what humans know and can do that non-humans do not know and cannot do, which affects how we use animals, how we treat them. The 18th century essayist Thomas Carlyle described the human as a featherless, biped, broad-nailed, tool-using animal, as the only species who has the foresight and cleverness to extend the range of things that we can do with our bodies by using objects. Well, along came Jane Goodall. This is David Greybeard and Gombe in 1960. Her observations of chimpanzees using grass stems to fish for termites upended the notion that man is special in using tools. And since her discovery, we've seen that ants, wasps, finches, crows, otters, on and on, also use tools, if only we were looking. But the skeptics were ready. Fine, perhaps they use tools, but certainly don't make them or keep them. Shortly, it was discovered that chimpanzees refine their sticks and also have sticks for different purposes. For punching a hole in a termite mound, one, and a probe for pulling out the tasty termites. And so do Goffin's cockatoo, who, this is very recent research, who use a tool set that they draw from for different tasks. Like in this case, puncturing a hole in a membrane and then a longer tool for dislodging a desired cashew to consume. Okay, people pivoted. It must be that we have a culture where we hand down traditions from one generation to the next that makes us unique. Except in Japan, a wild snow monkey named Emo took the sweet potatoes that she was being provisioned with and began to wash them in a river, cleaning the sand off the potato. Then potato washing spread over the years among her troop, was handed down to the next generations, then revised and changed slightly, bringing the potatoes to the sea, where perhaps some saltiness improved their flavor. Culture. We went on. We must be the only animal to imitate, to teach, nope and nope, to use language. Sorry, vervet monkeys, prairie dogs, and chickens have different alarm cries for different threats. As was alluded to, honeybees dance to communicate to their hive mates where the best pollen is. And of course, Chaser, the border collie, she knew 1,022 words of names of toys and various actions to perform on those toys. And a dozen other criteria have been lobbed to distinguish us from non-human animals. None of them is an unqualified masterstroke. This leads us to the present. Realization that we are not so distinct from animals, and appreciation that there are also non-human animal capacities which we don't have and which are almost unimaginable. Importantly, to say that we're not so distinct is not to say that animals are just versions of humans. We make errors about animals when we think so. None of these animals is happy to see you. The smile of the dolphin and the axolotl is fixed on their faces. This dog and chimp both have a fear grin, put on when uncertain or scared. We make errors of behavior. People think this dog is guilty, feeling guilty. But research that I did showed that this look is a response to their owner thinking that they're guilty of some infraction. taking the cheese off the table or pulling the stuffing from the couch. What we found is that this look doesn't come up more often when they've done something actually wrong. It's a response to us when we seem to be getting angry. Still, the notion that there are special cognitive abilities that make humans the most advanced, the most special animal, it's collapsed under the weight of evidence that non-humans of all sorts are sometimes more human than we are. They're empathetic. For instance, rats show empathy. These laboratory rats will release another rat from a cage even when there's nothing in it for them. No way to interact with the rat, no reward. Also, by the way, rats like being tickled. They have personality, something that wasn't acknowledged for many, many years. Pigs, for instance, are naturally optimistic or pessimistic in their personality, and this state can change with better or worse welfare. They dream, they hope, they plan. For instance, zebra finches dream at night of the songs of their species that they're trying to learn in the day, like we dream of the talk we're going to give the next day, or of the future that we hope to secure. They have a sense of self. And chimpanzees, dolphins, elephants, and now even a social fish that lives among the coral reefs called a cleaner wrasse has passed the mirror mark test of self-recognition, using a mirror to guide themselves to notice that there's a mark on their bodies, the gold standard of tests of self-awareness in non-human animals. With this, what has snuck into scientists' understanding is that not only were non-human animals passing our cognitive tests, but we were getting clear evidence that they were having experiences. They were sentient. Some experiences that we can't or have trouble imagining. After learning that bats see through echolocation, and not just bats, by the way, but toothed whales and dolphins and oil birds echolocate, the philosopher Thomas Nagel famously asked, "What is it like to be a bat?" and answered that he thought it was impossible to know. I don't entirely agree, but I am suitably impressed. For instance, broad-tail hummingbirds see all the colors that we do. In addition, they see several kinds of ultraviolet light. This was research done in Colorado, by the way. As do most non-human animals who see in color. Manatees sense the world with their facial vibrissae. These are specialized hairs that allow them to pull food in and distinguish it from sand, and also investigate anything that comes close to their face. Sea turtles navigate across thousands of miles using the magnetic fields of the earth. Dogs' sense of smell, I've posited, enables them to essentially smell the passage of time. They know how long you've been gone by the diminishment of your smell in the house. So the present state of research is, I do not know what it's like to be an octopus with a brain in each arm, but we're trying to find out. The future, applying what we've learned and are still learning, and ratifying this into a new societal understanding of animals, including new laws, new policies, new ways of living together. The essayist Elaine Scarry has written that science's attempt to confer greater clarity on that which is already clear. That animals are sentient is clear, that they feel things, want things, have friendships, plan, hope, that they have experiences. But this leads us to a host of new frontier questions seeking greater clarity. Given that we affect them greatly, whether they are pets or impugned as what we call pests, animals on farms or in the wilderness, what is our obligation to them? How should we treat them? Should we use them? Because of some of their traits, like their responsiveness to us, their ability to understand the meaning of our gaze, their communication with us, dogs have become family. They're an animal who it's interesting to consider because by most accounts, they're pretty privileged in our society. But to the law, dogs are property, considered as essentially equivalent to a chair, ownable. To say that you own your chair is to say that you have absolute rights to do with your chair what you'd like. You have rights to sit on it, to turn it upside down, to reupholster it, to keep it unsat upon in the basement for 20 years, or toss it out. Your chair has no say in it. The same is more or less true of your dog as your chair. Though dogs feel, love, suffer when abandoned, enjoy rolling around in the snow or fallen leaves, and presumably want to not be sat on, they have precisely no rights in the matter. There are some constraints on our behavior with our pups. Animal cruelty laws forbid injuring animals, but only willful injury, not minor cruelties. And there are consequences that you might not often think of this legal status. In the case of divorce, they're considered simply assignable property. Although in a few states, judges allow that the well-being of the dog should be considered in determining which person the dog winds up with, mostly they're distributed like silverware or chairs. About the disposition of a dog named Tiny Tim, this judge said, the analysis is no different than it would be if we were talking about a bicycle. They can be used in biomedical research. This was one of Pavlov's dogs who were experimented on for years without anesthetics. That was the early 20th century. Today, in the 21st century, 65,000 dogs were used in biomedical research in the US last year. And that's only the experiments, teaching, research, surgery, or tests considered to have sufficient accompanying pain or distress that they needed to be reported on. They are currency. Anyone can be a breeder and sell dogs for money. Most breeders in the US are small enough that they don't qualify to have to meet federal standards for care. The scale of the dog sale market is astonishing. And as currency, they can be collateral for a loan and seized for lack of payment, as happened with this pug, Edda, seized by German officials for her owner's non-payment of taxes and sold on eBay. Although, I should warn you, most of your dogs, if adopted, will have a replacement value of nothing because you didn't buy them. Another effect of their being property is we can make more of them at our whim. The ease with which we can acquire dogs, you could probably buy a dog online before the end of this talk, is a major problem for their welfare as it feeds into irresponsible ownership, treatment, and relinquishment. But it's not just through breeding that we make more of them now, but through cloning. Famously, Barbra Streisand cloned her dog Samantha. Here her grave is gazed upon by two of her clones. This is now a business, a problematic one, as it uses perhaps a dozen other dogs in the process of making one. There are dogs to be egg donors, to be surrogate mothers. Some dogs are not viable or disposed of because they don't look enough like the original. It's a new kind of farming of animals. Another result of this property status is that, like the chair, we can alter them. We can desex them, of course, addressing society's issue of overpopulation of dogs, our fault, not theirs. But we can also, and do, cut their ears and tails for appearance's sake. This is part of the breed standard still of dozens of dogs. And we have, over generations, inbred them to produce flat-faced dogs, more person-faced dogs, whose looks we like, despite the horrific problems that we know these brachycephalic, small-faced dogs inevitably face. And we can get rid of them at our pleasure. There is no punishment for outright abandoning a dog as long as it's into the arms of a shelter. If we're allergic or the apartment we're moving into won't allow it, our moral and legal code say that we can give them up. Note that we then hand off the dirty work of the dog's life to those overworked many, such as at shelters. In the not too distant past, vacation euthanasia was a regular phenomenon. Now there is also frequent convenience euthanasia. And also the right to euthanize a dog to have them buried with you, as happened to this Shih Tzu at her departed owner's wishes in her will. What holds for dogs holds for all animals, and more so. Given what we're learning about their cognitive emotional experiences, the natural next step is to ask about how that's going to translate into changes in how we treat animals, into how we live with pets on the one hand, and how we manage those animals we think of as pests on the other. On those that we inelegantly call farm animals, bred for food, or wild animals on the other side of the feedlot. We might ask, should we be using animals at all? We should be asking, how can we determine an individual animal's or a species' well-being? How can we ensure it? Pursuing these questions is going to change our relationship with animals societally. I think back to Plato's urge to distinguish humans and non-humans. The distinction isn't that we're featherless or bipedal or don't have claws. Today, it looks like the distinction between us is that we can plan to help change the lives of both humans and non-humans for the better. And by the way, maybe animals can do that too. I remain agnostic. So I end with, as a researcher, a pleasure to be living with these animals, in this time, when our discoveries have a practical effect. And I end with many questions about what we should do, unanswered. This is hard. Thank goodness there's a new Institute of Animal Sentience here to tackle those questions. Thanks very much to Dr. Brinkmann for affording the possibility of this, and to all of you.
Well, thank you all. I want to just extend my gratitude for you joining us here today. We're really pleased that the First Gentleman and the Governor, Dr. Horowitz, could make it. Dr. Beckhoff, Joanne MacArthur. There's a lot of people here that made this possible, and it's really pretty moving to see an occasion where you have a new institute dedicated to animal minds and animal feeling that is being welcomed into the halls of academia. So I want to just thank you for being part of that. I also want to thank a couple of people who haven't been acknowledged as directly as they should yet today. And first is Kevin, are you still here? Kevin Morris, who's, he may have stepped out, but the current director of the Institute for Human-Animal Connection. So we thank Kevin for his work, and thank you for being here, Kevin. And the Animal Law Program Manager and Director that keeps all of the things going well, Jess Bulio. So thank you, Jess, for being here. My job is really to close this out today, but I did want to say, since I am a law professor, having listened to that wonderful talk and thought a lot about the Governor and Marlon's comments, I just wanted to say, 60 seconds worth about how I think this all fits into law and the law school and the collaboration with the social work school. For a long time, I've wondered and pondered this question of how we obtain social change, and there's these sort of radically different views, and there's no right answers, right? And it's really, there's nothing approaching a consensus. But for the non-lawyers in particular in the room, there's something kind of magical. It seems like if you go out and you bring a particular case, or you write a particular law, everything is going to change. And I see Manny in the back of the room there, who's a great lawyer for Earth Justice, and he struggles with these same things, right? Like, what are we going to do? We're going to win this case. If we lose this case, does everything end? If we win this case, are suddenly animals going to have this great status? And what I'm always reminding my law students, and what I want to sort of caution today, is that the law, despite what we might think is not written on these stone tablets, it doesn't come down from on high. The legislators aren't perfect. The case and the litigation process is deeply flawed and human-centered. And we have to be looking for ways to inject into the law sort of spirit and emotion and the empirical-driven insights that people like Dr. Horowitz are giving us. It's only through this sort of combination is anything really lasting going to happen. It's not going to be because we add an amendment to a financial bill, or we win a particular case for an elephant at a zoo. It takes much more than that. And so a lot of what we want to do with the collaboration between the Institute for Human Animal Connections and the law school and this wonderful new Institute for Sentience is think about ways to drive lasting legal change, right? And it's going to require empirical evidence. It's going to require the work of the scientists in the room who are thinking about this, and the social reformers who care about animals inside the law. Because it doesn't happen magically, and it's not going to happen in a case, and it's not going to happen in a bill, even if we have Marlon Reis and Roland working in the legislature, right? So with that, I just thank you all so much for coming. Come by the law school anytime. Look me up. We're all interested in collaborating, and thank you again, Dr. Horowitz, for being here.